The night in Buenos Aires had its own rhythm, each beat a living pulse of the city. Isabel felt her heart race as she entered the dance studio, the air thick with the sweet aroma of wine and the captivating sound of tango. The music seemed to seep into her soul, calling her to the floor where the intensity of the dance left invisible marks, like scars from a love that could never be erased. Each movement held a promise, a whispered sentiment between partners, but no one captivated her like Ricardo, whose gaze was as intense as the steps he executed with flawless precision. When he chose her as his partner that night, Isabel felt a wave of nervous excitement. Ricardo's gaze was mesmerizing, deep, and full of hidden mysteries. In his arms, Isabel realized that dancing could be more than just steps and technique. It was absolute surrender, a fusion of souls. He led with calm confidence, and she let herself go, forgetting the world around them. With each beat, their hearts beat in perfect harmony, as if destiny had brought them together for that eternal tango. She knew, without understanding why, that something special was unfolding. Ricardo's touch, firm and warm, sent electricity through her skin. As he guided her, Isabel felt her life changing, as if each step in the captivating rhythm was a silent declaration of love. There was something irresistible about him, a magnetic force that transcended words and made her want to dive into the mysteries hidden in his dark eyes. She felt safe, embraced, almost as if that dance was a premonition of a romance as fiery as it was dangerous. The music swelled, and with it, their rhythm intensified. The room, once full of other dancers, gradually faded away, leaving only the two of them as if the entire world had disappeared. Ricardo and Isabel were caught in an almost mystical dance where each turn and each pause was like a deep breath. She no longer knew where she ended and he began, but she knew she had never felt anything like this before. In that moment, every detail became unforgettable, from the beat of the music to the gentle touch of his hand on her waist. When the music stopped, Isabel felt a sense of emptiness take over. Reality returned, but the spell lingered. Ricardo stepped away, but not without leaving an indelible mark on her soul. She felt as if the dance had been not just a meeting of bodies but a meeting of destinies. Silently, she watched him walk away, carrying a piece of her with him. Isabel knew that from that moment on, something inside her had changed forever. In those brief minutes, she had fallen in love, not with a man but with the dance itself, which now bore Ricardo's face. A passion had been born, fierce and overwhelming, as if tango had planted an uncontrollable desire in her heart. Isabel knew she had to see him again, feel that overwhelming energy again. She knew she would find him once more, that this tango was only the first of many, for something greater than herself connected them, something that could only be lived, not explained. Isabel left the studio with a racing heart and restless spirit, unaware that this dance was merely the prelude to something far greater. She felt that she was about to embark on an unexpected, consuming journey, one where each step would take her deeper into the essence of an unforgettable love. Something was about to begin, something that would change her life, and she couldn't wait to discover what destiny had in store for her and Ricardo. In the weeks that followed, Isabel and Ricardo danced together as if they were made for each other. The tango they shared was more than a dance. It was an unspoken dialogue where every movement revealed a secret, a hidden desire. Over time, the two became inseparable, bound by the music that surrounded them and by the illuminated nights of Buenos Aires. Their hearts beat in sync with every note, every step, as they explored the hidden corners of the city, always searching for a new rhythm, a new stage. The world seemed perfect when they were together. In every competition, every spontaneous performance, they felt as if nothing could separate them. It was a romance alive and pulsing, fueled by the thrill of competitions and the warmth of applause. Isabel felt that she had found something rare, something few people experience in a lifetime. And Ricardo, with his mysterious gaze and irresistible smile, became more and more the center of her universe, the reason for her joy in each beat of her heart. They made plans for the future, dreamed of taking their talent around the world, dancing on legendary stages, sharing their love for dance with other cultures. Every conversation was filled with promises, with a youthful enthusiasm that made the dream seem possible. Isabel believed that, by Ricardo's side, anything was possible. It was as if life had finally revealed a purpose, something grand that united them and inspired them to keep going. But like the melody of a tango that suddenly turned somber, reality knocked on their door. One afternoon, Ricardo appeared with a different look, a tension Isabel had never seen before. He had received an offer, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to work abroad as a choreographer. It was the kind of offer he would have accepted without thinking years earlier. But now, with Isabel by his side, the decision became a painful dilemma, and he didn't know what to do. Silently, Isabel felt the weight of uncertainty hanging over them. That night, as they danced under the stars, both knew it might be the last time. The world around them disappeared, leaving only them and the music that seemed to make the moment last forever. Isabel felt a tightness in her chest, a mix of pain and fear that she tried to hide as she twirled in Ricardo's arms. There was an urgency in the way he held her, an intensity that spoke of wordless goodbyes, as if each step were an attempt to imprint the moment forever. The thought of separation was too painful to accept. Every time she looked at Ricardo, she saw an uncertain future, a path that could separate them forever. Isabel wanted to believe that their love was strong enough to endure, but the silence between them grew heavy, suffocating, like a promise that could not be kept. The offer was irresistible, and they both knew it, even though the pain of admitting it was unbearable. As they parted ways in the early morning, Isabel felt a growing emptiness. The dance had ended, but the echo of that night lingered in her heart, pulsing like a distant, sad melody. Ricardo was leaving, but he left a deep memory in Isabel, a mark that could never be erased. And though they did not say it aloud, they both knew that life would never be the same again. The days after that last dance were a bitter mix of hope and despair. Isabel tried to keep busy, but the emptiness left by Ricardo's absence was impossible to ignore. Every street in Buenos Aires seemed to remind her of the moments they'd shared, of the dreams and plans that now dissolved like dust in the wind. She knew she had to accept the choice he was about to make, but something inside her resisted, as if the love she felt could somehow stop the inevitable. Ricardo, for his part, was conflicted. The offer was a rare opportunity, recognition for years of dedication to dance. But the idea of leaving Isabel behind, of leaving without knowing when he would return, consumed him. Every thought led him back to that starry night when whispers of love had lingered between them. He found himself torn between two passions: dance, which had shaped his life, and Isabel, who had transformed his soul. And as he tried to decide, time slipped through his fingers like sand. Finally, on a quiet night, he sought her out for one last farewell. Isabel, her heart racing, knew that this encounter would mark the end of something precious. They walked side by side along the cobbled streets, slowly, absorbing every second, every shared breath. It was as if that walk was a rite of passage, a moment where they could say goodbye without words. Isabel knew she couldn't stop him, but the pain of their parting burned in her chest, threatening to destroy everything they had built. Under the stars, Ricardo extended his hand, and Isabel, with a lump in her throat, silently accepted. In a secluded corner of the city, the two danced one last time, as if tango could express everything that words could not. The world around them disappeared, and the music was all that remained, filling the space between their bodies and souls. Isabel felt his presence in every movement, a slow and painful farewell that would forever live in her memory. At the end of the dance, Isabel felt as if her heart had been shattered and left there on that makeshift dance floor. Ricardo held her in a tight embrace, trying to etch the warmth, the scent, the essence of her into his memory. He knew those memories would be his solace on lonely days to come. Isabel, for her part, wished she could freeze the moment, hold him in her arms forever. But fate seemed unyielding, and dawn was approaching, bringing with it the harsh reality. Before he left, Ricardo promised to keep in touch. Isabel, holding back tears, nodded, but deep down, she felt that something between them was breaking. The promise of letters and phone calls felt like a fragile illusion, something that could easily crumble with distance. Even so, she clung to those promises, holding on to them like an anchor in the storm she was about to face. When they finally parted, Isabel was left alone under the first light of day, feeling the silence of dawn envelop her heart. Ricardo was leaving, taking a piece of her with him, leaving behind a longing she knew would never fade. And as he turned the corner, he disappeared, leaving an emptiness that no dance could ever fill. In the days that followed, Isabel tried to adjust to Ricardo's absence, but every street, every familiar melody in Buenos Aires brought her back to a love that now felt lost. She kept dancing, filling her nights with precise movements and intense performances, but life without Ricardo was like an unfinished melody. Moments of joy became rare, and even the spark in her eyes began to fade. Tango, which once brought her a sense of freedom, now felt like a painful reminder of something that was gone forever. At first, his letters arrived frequently, bringing news from a distant world, places she could only imagine. Each letter was a promise that, even from afar, he still thought of her, still carried her in his heart. Isabel read those words over and over, like a prayer, trying to feel the love that once seemed unbreakable. But over time, the letters became fewer, and she realized, with a pang of sadness, that perhaps the world out there was calling him more loudly than the love they had shared. The nights without letters grew agonizing, the void filled only by the oppressive silence of her room. Isabel tried to understand what had happened, but doubts began to gnaw at her heart. Had Ricardo found someone else? Had the allure of bigger stages and unfamiliar cities fascinated him so much that he forgot everything they had shared? These questions haunted her, and she found herself lost in memories that gradually turned to pain. Even with a broken heart, Isabel decided to move forward, channeling her emotions into dance. Tango became her refuge, an escape from the longing that consumed her. In every performance, she danced as if Ricardo were there, watching, feeling the passion that still burned in her chest. Yet, his absence was a constant shadow, a bitter reminder that the love they had shared existed only in her memories. As time passed, Isabel gained recognition and began teaching the art of tango to new dancers. The years brought her success and applause, but even under the spotlight, she felt a part of herself was stuck in the past, trapped in a love that had never had the chance to fully bloom. She was admired, but her soul felt empty, as if she had lost something essential along the way. With every student she trained, she saw a bit of herself, a raw passion that reminded her of what she had once lived. The years passed and the city changed, but Isabel remained devoted to tango, dancing with the same intensity, even if her smile was no longer the same. Every time she heard the music, she felt a longing beyond words, a gentle, constant ache. She had learned to live with the silence, to coexist with Ricardo's absence, but on lonely nights, she still wondered what would have happened if he had stayed. Those doubts lingered like a melancholy dance, an echo of a love that would never leave her. The silence between them had become a familiar presence, and though Isabel moved on, part of her heart remained in that studio where they had danced for the last time. The letters had stopped, time had passed, but the love they shared persisted, silent and invisible, hidden in the steps she took on the dance floor. Isabel had become a strong woman, but inside she was still the young woman who had loved deeply, waiting in silence for what would never come. Decades passed like a breeze, taking with them the shadows of a past Isabel would never forget. She became a respected figure in the tango scene of Buenos Aires, known not only for her technical skill, but for the intensity and emotion she poured into every performance. Her classes were always full, and her students admired her grace and passion. Isabel thrived in her career, but behind the glow of each performance, a part of her soul remained intact, holding on to the memories of a love that had never fully faded. Over time, Isabel married and built a family, filling her life with the happiness she believed was possible. Yet even amid the joys of a successful life, she felt an emptiness, an absence no other love could fill. She never spoke of Ricardo to her husband or children. It was a story that belonged to her past, a memory she kept as a precious secret. The nights were long, and sometimes, when silence took over the house, she allowed herself to remember those moments of youth. Ricardo, on the other hand, followed a path of fame and prestige. As a choreographer, he traveled the world, creating for renowned stages and participating in international events. He too built a family, and his name became synonymous with excellence in the world of dance. Yet, as full as his life was of applause and recognition, there was something the stage could not replace, a quiet flame that burned only on his loneliest nights when he allowed himself to remember Buenos Aires and the tango he had once shared with Isabel. Time transformed them both, leaving wrinkles and marks from lives lived intensely. But in their hearts, the love they had experienced lingered like a distant, soft song. Neither knew if the other still thought of that past, but somewhere deep down, they both carried the certainty that what they had lived was real and powerful. It was an invisible connection, a thin line that kept them united even in separate lives. Isabel, now with children and grandchildren, devoted herself to teaching tango to a new generation. She inspired them to dance from the heart, to give themselves completely to the music, as she once had. And though she lived a full life, there were moments when the past felt closer than ever. In each young person passionate about tango, she saw a reflection of herself and, for a moment, wondered what it would be like if Ricardo were there beside her, watching everything she had built. Even from afar, Ricardo never stopped feeling Isabel's influence in his art. In every choreography, he found himself incorporating gestures and movements that had been born with her. It was as if she were still present in his work, a silent and invisible muse inspiring each creation. And as the world applauded his accomplishments, he knew a part of him remained in Buenos Aires, dancing with her in the halls of memory, where time held no power. In their parallel lives, Isabel and Ricardo continued, marked by a silent longing, a memory time had never managed to erase. And as tango continued to play in their souls, they both knew that no matter how different their paths had been, they would always be connected by something greater, something eternal. Like separate steps of the same dance, both waited to see what destiny might still have in store for them. At 60, Isabel was a woman of striking presence, every movement exuding the wisdom and passion of a life dedicated to tango. Her eyes, once filled with the vibrancy of youth, now held a serene glow born from experience. When the invitation to the Tango Festival in Buenos Aires arrived, something awakened inside her. The event promised to gather dancers from across the decades, celebrating the art that had defined their lives. Isabel didn't hesitate. An old longing, one that had never truly faded, called her back, and this was her chance to relive the past, if only for one night. The city wasn't the same as when she and Ricardo had danced side by side, but the essence of Buenos Aires remained untouched, pulsing like Tango itself. Isabel felt each corner, every alley, like an old friend welcoming her home. In her heart there was a mix of excitement and nostalgia, a yearning for something she couldn't quite name. The idea of returning to the stage, of dancing for the world, gave her an unexpected sense of renewal, as if time had rolled back and she was once again that young woman filled with passion. The days leading up to the festival were a mix of preparation and introspection. Isabel practiced alone, allowing herself to sink into memories and emotions she kept hidden for so long. Each step took her back to moments that seemed like another lifetime. She wondered if Ricardo would also be there, if somewhere in the world he still thought of her. The thought of him was a distant melody, a soft echo that persisted, and Isabel couldn't ignore the desire to see him again. On the night of the event, Isabel arrived at the venue with her heart pounding. The atmosphere was a blend of lights and laughter, familiar faces mixed with strangers, all united by their love for tango. She glanced around, searching for something she couldn't quite define, an unspoken expectation. The music filled the room, and Isabel felt herself swept up by the familiarity of the moment, as if, finally, everything made sense. The past and present intertwined in an invisible dance, a promise about to be fulfilled. As she moved through the crowd, greeting old friends and colleagues, Isabel couldn't stop herself from looking for a particular face. Time seemed to slow, and she felt something special was about to happen. She sensed his presence before she saw him, a premonition that made her heart race. There was an inexplicable force pulling her, a certainty that this night would change everything. And then amid the crowd she saw him. Ricardo stood there, his expression serene but his gaze revealing a storm of emotions. He looked older, the lines on his face telling the story of a life well lived. But in his eyes, Isabel recognized the same spark as before. Their eyes met for only a second, but it was enough to make the room fade away around them. In that instant it was just the two of them, wrapped in the music and the shared past that still bound them. Isabel took a deep breath, feeling each emotion as if it were the first time. Ricardo was there, and she knew that fate had brought them back to the beginning. The night promised more than just a reunion. It was a chance for a new dance, a second opportunity for a love that had never truly extinguished. The dance floor was bathed in soft light, and Isabel felt every fiber of her being tense as she walked toward Ricardo. He stood in the center, watching her with a look that mixed surprise and emotion. The years that had passed seemed irrelevant. In that moment, all that mattered was the unbroken bond between them. Isabel felt young again, as if the woman he had once known decades earlier was still there, ready for another dance. Ricardo's gaze enveloped her, and Isabel saw her own longing reflected in him. They had both moved on, built families, careers, yet none of that seemed to matter now. She wondered what he thought of seeing her there. If he too felt that time had not erased what they'd shared. Isabel took a deep breath, trying to hold herself together. But each step brought her closer to an emotionally charged place where old memories might rekindle feelings that had never really faded. When they finally stood face to face, the world around them seemed to disappear. There was an almost frightening familiarity, as if the years of separation were only a blink. Isabel noticed his extended hand, a silent invitation to relive together the story they'd left behind. Every line on his face told a story, every expression a reminder of all he had become, and she felt the weight of that moment, as if they were destined to meet there, on that dance floor, to complete an unfinished dance. Ricardo kept his gaze fixed on her, and Isabel realized that she wasn't the only one overcome by memories. He seemed reluctant to speak, perhaps fearing that any words might break the enchantment of the moment. Instead, he extended his hand, and Isabel, her heart racing, accepted the gesture, feeling a wave of electricity run through her. It was as if that touch was a bridge to the past, a chance to repair what time and distance had destroyed. Isabel allowed herself to be led by him once more, feeling the warmth of his hand in hers, the touch she thought she'd never feel again. The crowded room full of dancers and spectators disappeared, leaving only the two of them connected by an invisible line. Their first steps were slow, almost hesitant, as if they were rediscovering a lost rhythm. With every movement, Isabel felt a blend of relief and tension, a desire to completely surrender to the moment, and at the same time, a deep fear of being hurt again. The dance was familiar, but the weight of the decades had transformed them. Each step carried the burden of the years they'd lived apart, each spin a silent confession of regrets and unfulfilled dreams. Isabel felt that she was not only dancing with Ricardo but with her own past, facing ghosts she had tried to bury. Yet at the same time, something inside her was rekindled, a flame she'd thought was extinguished, now burning with overwhelming intensity beside him. When the music ended, Isabel realized she was holding her breath, and as she looked into Ricardo's eyes, she saw the same sense of loss and hope. It was as if that tango had rewritten their story, as if the years of silence and longing had found redemption in every step, every movement. And as the room returned to life around them, Isabel knew their reunion was far from over. There was so much left to say, so much left to feel, and that tango was only the beginning of something that even time couldn't erase. As the music faded, Ricardo and Isabel stepped back, but the space between them was filled with unspoken emotions. Both were aware that they needed to talk, that it was impossible to dance together without facing the weight of the past. Isabel felt torn between wanting to ask why he'd never returned and fearing that the love they had lived wasn't as deep as she'd imagined. The questions she'd never asked hovered between them like shadows, awaiting answers that Ricardo seemed hesitant to give. Ricardo looked at Isabel, and she saw a mixture of guilt and sadness in his eyes. It was an expression she knew well, as if he carried the weight of old regrets. He told her that life abroad had been filled with highs and lows, and that amidst success and travel, he had always thought of her. Isabel listened to each word, feeling both understood and hurt, as if her own story was being told from another perspective. Memories of lonely nights and forgotten letters returned like waves, breaking the silence between them. Isabel tried to keep her emotions in check, but painful memories began to surface. She thought of the years she had waited for a letter, a sign, and the sense of abandonment she had carried in her heart. Ricardo explained that on several occasions, he had tried to come back but always hesitated, thinking she had moved on. It was a cycle of expectations and disappointments that had kept them apart, an invisible barrier created by fears and misunderstandings they had never dared to confront. Ricardo's words stirred a mixture of anger and sadness in Isabel. She wished he had taken the risk, that he hadn't hidden behind assumptions. The years they spent apart had been built on unspoken choices, decisions that had left scars on both of them. Isabel knew she bore her share of the blame, having moved on without ever clarifying her true feelings. Now, under the light of the dance floor, she realized that while the past was painful, it didn't have to define her future. Ricardo confessed that despite his successful life and the family he'd built, he had never forgotten Isabel. She felt a spark of hope and regret ignite. The feelings that had once been so overwhelming were still there, hidden but intact. She knew their lives had taken separate paths, but in that moment, the present offered a new chance, an opportunity to reconnect, and maybe even mend what had been broken. Isabel thought carefully, aware that revisiting the past wouldn't be easy. They were both different now, older and more experienced, with stories the other would never fully understand. Yet, the enduring feeling between them was too strong to ignore. She realized that despite everything, she still wanted to dance with him, not only on the dance floor but through life, in an attempt to rebuild what had been destroyed. They looked at each other in silence, as if the decision was mutual, a silent understanding that there was still something between them worth exploring. Isabel felt her heart race, knowing that despite the hurt, she was ready to give a second chance to the love that time had never truly erased. As the festival drew to a close, Isabel and Ricardo were invited to take the stage, to rekindle the magic that had once enchanted Buenos Aires decades earlier. The audience waited with anticipation, but for them, this moment held so much more. It was an opportunity to transform all the pain and regrets into something beautiful, a final dance that would carry the marks of a lifetime. Isabel's heart pounded, aware that each movement would symbolize everything they had lived, everything they had lost, and everything they might still become. Ricardo extended his hand, and Isabel, without hesitation, took it. The music began softly, a murmur that filled the room, and as their first steps intertwined, Isabel felt herself swept back to the past, as if time itself had rewound. Every movement was a silent confession, a gesture that spoke more than words could express. In every turn, every pause, she felt the weight of all the years that had kept them apart, and at the same time, the relief of finally being together again. The dance intensified, and the room seemed to vanish around them. Isabel felt the deep connection between their bodies, as if they were two halves of the same soul. She let herself get lost in the music, in Ricardo's touch, feeling whole in a way she hadn't for so long. This tango was a tribute to a love that had never died, a quiet celebration of a passion that, despite everything, had endured. Isabel knew they were not dancing for the audience but for themselves, a farewell and a redemption all at once. As the music reached its climax, Isabel and Ricardo surrendered completely. Their movements flowed with overwhelming intensity, each one reflecting memories and broken dreams. The pain and love between them seemed to merge, creating something that transcended the dance. Isabel realized that each step was freeing her, as if the dance allowed her to let go of the past but also to honor it, accepting it as part of who she had become. When the final note echoed through the room, Isabel and Ricardo stayed in each other's arms, the world around them in complete silence. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were tears of relief, of a love finally reconciled with time. She looked at Ricardo and in that moment, saw not only the man she had loved in her youth, but the partner she had always wanted by her side. She felt that this tango, this moment, was a promise that no matter what the future held, their love would always be eternal. The applause broke the silence, but Isabel and Ricardo barely noticed. For them, this tango represented a lifetime of meetings and partings, of dreams and regrets. Isabel understood that what mattered now was not the past they had left behind, but the present they could still build. She felt at peace knowing that their love had survived, that even though time had separated them, the essence of what they shared was still alive, pulsing, unbreakable. They left the stage hand in hand, needing no promises or words. The last tango was not a goodbye but a silent celebration of something that could never be forgotten. Isabel knew that this love would stay with her forever, like the soft echo of a dance that, even when the music stopped, would continue playing in her heart, always. The story of Isabel and Ricardo teaches us that true love transcends time and circumstances. Sometimes life takes us far from the ones we love, but certain connections remain alive, even from a distance. Isabel and Ricardo showed that despite the years apart, despite the choices that separated them, their love never truly faded. It simply waited patiently, for the right moment to flourish once more. This is the beauty of a lasting love. It endures, it transforms, and it grows even stronger. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt tales of love. Tap the notification bell to stay updated on new stories, and share this video with someone who believes in the power of true love. Together, let's celebrate unforgettable stories that show the strength of love that stands the test of time.